This is Linda Lehrhaupt, and I'd like to welcome you to the Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project. Podcast number 6, on guided meditations.
One of the aspects of being a teacher is making tapes for the different exercises. At the beginning, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of time and energy that they'll find themselves putting into preparing their guided meditations. They'll spend hours writing texts and rewriting them and editing them. I think that one of the misunderstandings behind all this is that there's something called a perfect text, that there's something called a perfect meditation. So it's almost like magical thinking, where we think if we just get it right, it'll be perfect. And all our students will get everything that they need from the meditation, and they'll think we're great, and it'll all come together. But that's not the way it is. I had a really important experience in the early years of my teaching MBSR, which helped me to see that there's no such thing as a perfect tape. And that what really matters is a sense of connection and a sense of authenticity and aliveness. That's what students appreciate, and that's what supports them the most in practicing. When I first came to Germany and was teaching MBSR, I was self-conscious about my German. I've been studying for a while and teaching in German, but the idea of doing a tape where I knew that I would make mistakes in pronunciation or grammar, and even if I had it written out, I knew that I would immediately be recognized as quote-unquote a foreigner, and I was shy about that. I was also concerned that not speaking perfect German would result in my students being distracted or not being really able to just allow themselves to unfold in the meditation, as it were. So I worked on my texts, and when it came time to record it, I asked a student of mine to record the meditations for me. I gave out the body scan in week 1 and felt good about it and thought, okay, I've done the very best I can. The German's perfect and whatever. When everyone arrived at class the next week, the first question out of their mouths was, who was that on the body scan? I said, why? They said, well, it was obvious it wasn't you. And I said, yes, I know, but I felt that my German wasn't good enough, and I decided to ask someone else to do the meditation. And one person who seemed to speak for all said, I don't want anybody else. You're the person I trained with. I'm used to hearing you lead the meditations in class. I want to have your voice at home. I don't care if it's perfect, but it's familiar and it's supportive to me. And we laughed a bit, and I went home that week and recorded the body scan for them. That's the way the rest of the course continued, where I re-recorded the rest of the guided meditations and just settled into it being me. That was a really important lesson that I learned. And in a way, it was a tremendous relief. It made clear to me that what really, quote unquote, works in a meditation is that it's alive. That there's a sense, as I said before, of connection. I'd like to suggest some qualities about guided meditations which are not in the realm of making them perfect, but rather allowing them to establish a sense of connection and also support participants, students, as they're practicing. I like to have the image that when I'm leading a guided meditation, It's as if I'm taking a walk with someone. Even that I'm holding their hand and perhaps leading them through a forest path or over a journey that is new for them. And that I'm holding them hand, but that I'm neither pulling them nor pushing them from behind. That there's a sense of we're walking together, and I may know a little bit more about where we're going, and that the person that I'm guiding can let go of the need to think about where to go and what to do, and rather just to unfold in the experience itself. And almost that they can forget that I'm there and feel that they're on their own journey. Another supportive quality, I think, is really our sense of timing. Timing involves various things, but one of them is knowing how much space to allow between saying things and how long the pauses can be. We found, and by we I mean teachers in our faculty in the Institute, that the less experienced people are in doing guided meditations, the more verbal support they need. Because there's a tendency to go into their heads and to begin thinking when there's not enough guidance. On the other hand, the guidance can be too much. There can simply be too much talking, too much of an effort to try to find the right words, and it becomes almost like an avalanche of words where participants don't have the opportunity to really go into their bodies, let's say if they're doing the body scan, to connect with the body part. I think if I continue with the image of the avalanche, we really don't want to snow people under with the weight of our words so that they feel at some point buried in an avalanche and not being able to either breathe or find their way out. I think also the choice of the language that we use is an important factor. I've noticed a tendency to use richer and fuller language in doing some of the guided meditations. It's almost as if there's a competition to try to find a new word or a new way of expressing things so that people either won't get bored or we think that the use of the language, if it's very poetic or descriptive, might be more inspiring for people. I have a particular perspective on that, and it is that I feel that when the language begins to move beyond the realm of everyday, when it gets either too poetic or too descriptive or too caught up in its own images, there's something going on which actually takes people away from their own bodies and envelops them in the language. And either it leads to thinking or it leads to images or ideas. And it feels kind of like being in a fog of beautiful words. But the result is that people are coming away from their own in-body experience and coming up into their heads. What also is motivating the teacher at that point to get so descriptive and so poetic or pictorial in their language? That's something that I think that's important to look at. Because our own intention in leading a meditation is also a key factor. If we're subtly or not so subtly caught up with the intention that we want to produce a certain result in a participant, then we have a very strong agenda. What having that strong agenda also does is to actually narrow the validity of people's experiences. How someone experiences a part of their body can be very different. Now, we can make suggestions about the possibilities that they might experience, For example, if we're talking about feeling a sensation in the body, we can give different examples of sensation, such as burning or hot or cold or piercing or throbbing, and a whole host of other kinds of descriptions, because sometimes it's helpful, particularly for people who may not be so in contact with what a sensation can be. But if we do it in a way that it, rather than being supportive, is prescriptive, as if this is what you should be feeling and this is the way you should be feeling it, then we're really doing our participants a disservice, because we're not allowing for the richness of whatever they might be experiencing. Now, our concern and our intention may be very well-meaning, but that well-meaningness is often tied to our own agenda. And I think if we're really being honest and open to what's coming up, we can see, am I caught up too much in my wish that it be successful? Whether I'm perceived as giving a good body scan or whether the participant is experiencing themselves as having a good body scan. And just being really honest and asking ourselves. And when we do that and we start again, our language becomes much more humble. It becomes much more supportive rather than prescriptive. It becomes clearer rather than caught up in words or pictures. And we reconnect to the path that's right under our feet. We reconnect to our role of being a supporting presence rather than determining the direction. There's perhaps one more element I'd like to comment upon about this theme of trying to make a body scan or a sitting meditation more interesting. And that's to observe what happens when someone falls asleep during an exercise and begins snoring. I remember when it first happened to me, when I was leading a body scan, and in a group of about 20 people, somebody in the middle of the room began snoring, and really loud. And I remember what I thought the moment I heard the first snore. Oh no, I'm making such a mess of this. So my first reaction was to immediately feel that I was doing something wrong, that it was my fault that this person was falling asleep, that there was something about the way I had led the body scan which was causing them to tune out and go to sleep. My second immediate thought was, oh my God, all the other people are going to be really pissed off and upset. And I could see some people were kind of moving a bit and were making faces. And again, I felt guilty, as if it was my fault that this was happening and their body scan was quote unquote ruined. I remember pausing for a while and being really lost in thought about what I should do and how could I correct the situation. And then somehow another part of me took over, maybe my wiser self, and just quickly said, Linda, it's all part of the experience. That helped me tremendously to settle down and just to continue with the meditation, not to rush to change it or to speak louder, or maybe some of you have had this experience that during leading an exercise and you begin to feel that maybe the attention is quite not there, you'll say, and now directing your attention to a part of the body where and you sort of like increase in volume before you're even aware of it. So it will happen. And maybe it'll happen more often than not until you really begin to connect to the fact that you are not responsible for people's experience and that whatever experience they're having in that moment is a teaching. I think that that's one of the core principles that's helped me over the years. That doesn't mean that everything that I do is okay, that I can be sloppy or that I can be inaccurate or whatever. But it does allow a certain kind of relaxation in the situation, and it allows one to continue delivering the meditation at least to the end. And then there's an opportunity to dialogue about what people experienced. If you had asked me today what I honestly think of my own guided meditations, I'd have to say, they're okay. That may not sound very enthusiastic, but for me, it's a huge relaxation. Not being able to teach in my native language for many years used to be a welcome and convenient excuse. When I began teaching more in English, and there was no way out about the language thing, I finally came to terms with what Pema Chodron calls the wisdom of no escape. It took work, but in the end, I can say with a soft smile, they're okay. They're good enough. And that's really good.
Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness-Based